Well, hello again, and welcome to our Tuesday chat. And we've been all over the place in recent weeks in Dublin and Cork, and as well as locally, but we haven't so far went north. So we're delighted today to go to Portadown and say hello to Mr. Ken Twyble. Hello, Ken.
How are you, Stephen? I'm so delighted to be with you in this form. I'd like to be together with you in reality, but it's lovely that we can Zoom together. So thank you.
Thank you, Ken, for joining us. And there's so much about Ken that we learn as we go along about his involvement within the Methodist Church in Ireland and other things. But maybe first of all, Ken, do you want to tell us a bit about your background, where you grew up and your sort of early life setting?
Well, my family originated in a little place called Ballinacor, where there is a Methodist church still, but it's roughly situated halfway between Portadown and Lurgan. And my earliest days would have been walking from near Portadown at that stage to Ballinacor to the Methodist church. It was something like, I think, in those days, 2 miles, and we walked. I remember my father and mother, and that was before we had cars, really. And so that was the beginning, if you like, of my Methodist walk. But eventually it appeared to be too long, and probably my brother and I were causing too much trouble in being forced to walk that distance. So we transferred to Edenderry on the Portadown circuit, and I've been a member of Edenderry ever since.
Great. Thank you. And in terms of your own journey of faith, how would you describe that? I'm sure it's not detached from your local church and sort of within your sort of earlier years.
Yeah, well, I look back on my foundations, if you like, and I remember my mother as the most godly person and loving person that you ever could have met. And she was a great influence over me. And in those early days, just post-war, things weren't easy. And she struggled, and I saw her many a time crying because she hadn't any money to make food for us. So that was the beginning. And it was when in early days we had in Sunday school in Edenderry what we called oh dear, what was the name of it? Decision Day, I think it was.
Right.
And it was the late Sidney Callahan was invited as the speaker, and he made an appeal to us as children. And I popped my hand up and said, I'm with you and with Jesus. And I've walked with Jesus ever since. And there have been times I've let him down badly, but he has never let me down.
Yeah, powerful. Well, in terms of your own sort of, as you moved into adulthood, and maybe even in education as well, and sort of early work, where do you want to tell us about sort of those times and where you're going at that time?
Yeah, well, I came up through Edenderry Primary School and was one of the lucky ones to get what we called at that time the qualifying, the 11 plus, and got to Portadown College and travelled through Portadown College and did my O levels and A levels, and then decided I wanted to be a teacher. and I wanted to get a degree. And I remember in those days there wasn't the system of transfer or anything. You had to work for where you wanted to go. And I remember I wanted to go to Queen's, and it didn't work out really.
Right.
And I was almost faced with having to go back to school for another year. But I remember a very good friend to my parents was the father of, well, he wasn't a professor, but he was a lecturer at Magee College in Londonderry. And so he took me under his wing, and I started a course in geography at Magee College. Did 2 years there, and then 2 years in Trinity in Dublin. So and got my BA at that stage. And then a year after that, I decided to get a dip ed through Queen's. So it was a case of sampling quite a number of colleges.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Qualified. And then I had done some in that last year, the dip ed year, the diploma year. I'd done some teaching practice in Killigamane Junior High School in Portadown. And in those days, there wasn't the the strict ways of dealing with things about interviews and so on.
Yeah.
And I had done my teaching practice with the principal, and he must have liked the way I did my teaching practice, because the following September, a teaching position arose in geography, and he invited me to apply for it, and I didn't even have to do an interview. I was offered the post.
Brilliant. Yeah.
And I spent 37 years in Killigamane Junior High School, finishing as vice principal.
Wow.
Taught geography, and I taught Latin, believe it or not.
Oh, right. Okay.
That was my subsidiary subject.
Yeah.
And
Fantastic.
my entire career, and retired many years ago now, 17 years ago.
Okay. Yeah. Brilliant. Okay. And maybe even just during the present times, when we think about teaching and the challenges on schools, do you have any reflections about the changes in education over those years? And maybe it would frighten you to think of going back into a classroom now or something, or would it?
Certainly would. It was the best decision I ever took to retire some 17 years ago at the age of 60. So you can do that wee bit of mathematics. But I'm still involved with education. I'm on 3 boards of governors. I chair 2 boards, and I'm on the Methodist Board of Education, and I'm part of the Transfers Representative Council as one of the Methodist representatives there, and I'm on the Control Sector Support Council. So I still have a lot of involvement in education. Once you get into education, it's hard to get out of it again.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, of course, then your other major area is politics, and so we want to ask you about that. And can I ask just maybe initially, how did you get involved in politics?
I suppose, being honest, and looking back on things, I never got out of it, because my father was an Ulster Unionist councillor in Portadown Council. It was at that stage, and it was always in the house. I was always a Unionist, probably with a small U, but always interested in politics.
Hmm.
I said to myself, well, I would like to be involved in that someday. And I remember wondering, would someone ask me, or would I? How do you get involved? And
Right.
I remember going to the local branch of the Ulster Unionist Party,
Hmm.
and just being involved in organising things. In those days, it was a lot easier to go to meetings and be
Yeah.
involved. And I did have a wee bit of conviction of
Yeah.
being a Christian and needing to be involved in society. And
Right. Because that's something I was going to ask you about. You know, how did you see? Yeah, what prompted you in that regard? And yeah, sorry, I might be
uh,
interrupting.
well, I don't regard myself as a harsh politician.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, I'm
Well,
not.
well, I certainly, I think we all know you as not a harsh person, anyway, kind of, or the very opposite. So yeah, thank you. Sorry.
I mean, I'm there to help people.
Yeah.
I'm there to offer support and help and advice. And if people don't want to accept it for what I am, that I'm genuine, well, that's their business.
Hmm.
And I've really involved. I've really enjoyed my involvement in politics.
Hmm.
Been a councillor now 20, 24, 25 years, I think.
Okay.
I've continued to be elected, so I keep
Good.
saying to
Well,
myself,
that's a good sign.
I
Yeah.
must be
Yeah.
doing something.
Yeah. Oh, you certainly are. And actually, you became mayor as well of your or your council area.
Yeah, as I said, my father was involved with Portadown
Uh,
Council. And Portadown was amalgamated then into Craigavon,
hmm.
and it was in Craigavon Council that I was mayor on two different occasions.
Hmm.
And now Craigavon is swallowed up in what we call the ABC Council,
Hmm.
which is Armagh, Banbridge, and Craigavon.
Hmm.
And I haven't been in high office in the ABC Council. That came into being, what was it, 7 years ago.
Hmm.
But it's funny, yesterday I had the last meeting of what we call the South Lake Project Board.
Right.
It's a new leisure centre project, and I was chair of the project board, and the last meeting was yesterday after having delivered a fantastic new facility on a what we call the balancing lakes in Craigavon.
Hmm. Hmm.
Uh, it's so encouraging to know that you can deliver on something like that,
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
and it gives me great pleasure
Hmm.
to serve the community, as it were.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I suppose when we think of politics, we normally, well, we maybe hear the news and we hear of the national political leaders and whatever, but working at a county sorry, not but at a council level, do you feel there's just a lot more cooperation and work goes on that just people don't appreciate actually goes on, and the people are extra there for the good of society? Any reflections on that?
Well, first and foremost, I'm a Methodist. I'm
Mm.
a Methodist uh, by birth.
Mm.
I'm a Methodist by conviction,
Mm.
and I'm a Methodist to serve the community.
Mm.
And the mantra that I always took in Methodism was, as Wesley, our founder, said, he was a friend of all, an enemy of none.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's where I feel I fit.
Mm.
I'm a friend of all and enemy of none.
Mm.
That is what has driven me through all my politics and trying to help people, and doing so as a Christian and as a friend and supporter. So that's what has driven me all the time through politics.
Yeah. And it strikes me when you mention 24 years, actually, just the numbers were going around in my head. So you would have become a county councillor just before the Belfast Good Friday Agreement was signed. I mean, that was at a different political level. But your journey, I suppose, before you were a councillor, in maybe the times of the Troubles, and then the early peace process, and then the different stages of things, you've covered quite a few different sort of developments over those decades. And then maybe also when we possibly from a distance hear Portadown, we maybe think, oh well, yes, there was certain trouble and issues and whatever there. And do you have any reflections in regard to the traditional divide in Northern Ireland and living out your life as a councillor in that setting?
Yeah, I mean, I hate division, and it's so wrong that we are divided. We're all human beings, and it doesn't matter what our aspiration is or what our hopes are. And by all means, we have to work for our hopes. And that fits into the political scene as well. But right through the heart of the difficulty in Portadown, I took chances and did things that left me sometimes at night very worried and concerned for myself and my well-being. I made my one thing to cross the divide. And the famous walk from Drumcree and so on that the Orange Men made, I got great criticism because I reached down and I remember David Trimble and I walking down the Gavahi Road, and it was a no-go area for Protestants at that stage, but I was accepted down there, and I became a great friend of I've forgotten his name now, McKenna, who was the leader of the local community groups and so on. And I carried messages from him to the Orange side and vice versa and so on. And it was tough going. But I felt that it was something I had to do. To this day, I am still the chair of what is now the Mayfair Business Centre, based on the Gavahi Road. Brendan McKenna and Brendan is now the chief executive, and I'm the chair of the board.
Oh, wow, yeah.
I look on that as something that I've achieved, and I don't need to be recognized for it, but it was tough at the time. But I felt it was what drove me as a Methodist and as a Christian to do.
Well, that's powerful, Ken, because, you know, I mean, I don't really know. I mean, I've known Portadown in certain ways for being there for certain reasons, but I don't really know Portadown myself, and I suspect that might go for most people in North Tipperary area. And maybe we only hear the negative headlines at times or down the years, but it's powerful to hear that lived out on the ground, and that commitment to reconciliation that received the criticism and that's that's the courage of reconciliation that is needed. And do you want to say anything more, because about in terms of politics can be seen as a bit of a risky or dirty business at times, or maybe one where you have to put your allegiances first before potential integrity. Now I'm thinking of very broad terms in the wider political arena, but any reflections from your own point of view of living out an integrity in political life?
I must say, I'm an Ulster Unionist by birth and by conviction and by personal approach, if you like, or a commitment to. And I've always found that there's room for everything. And I suppose it's hard to explain, but I found my natural roots.
Yeah.
There are more extreme groups on both sides, I suppose, of the tradition.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't live in those areas.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be me. But and I don't always agree with everything that the party says, but I don't often always agree with what I have to do.
Yeah.
I do it out of loyalty and of conviction and of long-term hope.
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you. Do you mind if I also just quickly ask the present big issue in terms of maybe the big issue is COVID-19, but anyway, I was going to ask about the protocol and the issues around the Irish Sea border, for want of a better way of putting it. And have you anything to say about that at the moment?
Yeah, well,
it's cheeky of me to be asking.
Oh, not at all, not at all. Yeah, I mean, it is an issue, and it was one that anybody, a blind man, should have seen.
Yeah.
That if Northern Ireland was as a British province, if you like, separate from the Irish Republican province, there was always going to be a problem if Northern Ireland left the EU as part of Britain, and Ireland didn't leave the EU. There was going to be a border, and that was inevitable because. But it was where it was going to be, and I mean, a blind man could have seen that it was going to be in the middle of the Irish Sea then, other than a natural.
And in terms of the journey of where putting together Brexit and just different changes and developments over the years, do you think Ulster Unionism is in a tricky position in terms of the changes in demographics and maybe political outlooks, and particularly in regard to any discussion around a new or united Ireland? Do you find your place, or sorry, the place you occupy and Ulster Unionism in particular, as opposed to the DUP, finds itself in a tricky place at the moment?
Well, yeah, I mean, there are always tricky places in politics and so on, but in terms of conviction and so on, I always felt that the best way to deal with anything is to be friendly. There are lots of nationalists or non-unionists, if you like, in Northern Ireland who would have been happy to vote Ulster Unionists and to vote Alliance and so on. And I think there's a strong conviction that there will be still a separation between the North and South in this island. I don't see in the next few years anyway any chance of a change in the whole thing.
And I think, sorry, I'm maybe coming into those questions, but I'm recognizing, like, ultimately your commitment to reconciliation, and this is what strikes me in any discussion, to be committed to the reconciliation of people has to come first, and the politics is, the working of that politically is. But I'm just love hearing your commitment to working for everybody, and if I can put it jokingly, Ken, you have had an All Ireland role. So,
and happy to be.
Good. Well, actually, tell us more about your wider involvement in the Methodist Church in Ireland, and then maybe also lay leader at a certain point.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been involved with my own church in Edenderry and the Portadown circuit for many, many years. I've been society steward in Edenderry, and I've been circuit steward in the Portadown circuit, which has, well, now 6 churches. It used to have 7. And been circuit treasurer for more years than I care to remember, at least 30, I think. I've been a local preacher also for, it must be coming up in 45 years now, I think, and have been attending Methodist conference, oh dear, for maybe 25 years or so. Right. So I was honored to be, I was voted to be the lay leader of the Methodist Church in Ireland, as the second one to have that role. And it was a wonderful honor then to be invited to travel all over Ireland to be involved in worship. I had, it was for 3 years, and at that time, now it's, isn't it, every 2 years?
2 years, yeah. And I should say, maybe for the sake of the circuit here, so Gillian Kingston was the first lay leader in that new role. She's on the circuit here, and then, so you were second, right?
Yeah. And I've been very friendly with Gillian. I mean, she's a lovely soul, and it was just lovely to have. I was still so deeply involved in so many things. It was difficult to do as much as I would have liked to have done.
Right. Yeah.
But it was a wonderful privilege.
Brilliant. Super. Well, with all your experience over the years in terms of the church and your own journey, and then being so involved in the wider church, do you have any reflections on the challenges for the church for today, as you see it from your perspective, and for the future?
I mean, I think if you weren't challenged, you're not having any effect. And that means that applies to a single person as well as a group of people. If you're not having any effect, you're not regarded as a challenger, and so on. So
I like what you're saying there. Yeah.
So you have to be seen to stand up for what you believe in, but do so in every way kindly and respectfully, and that that is what has driven me in all my years. And looking back over my years, I'm so grateful to God, because I've had a wonderful walk with the Lord, and He's seen me through all potential challenges and all the rest of it. And we can face challenge. We have to face challenge, but if we do it knowing that we're doing it in the Lord's cause, we shouldn't have any fear.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's what drives me on more than anything.
Powerful, powerful. Well, I think that's a very good note to finish on, Ken. Thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Not at all, Stephen. Thank you for asking me, because it's just been a joy, honestly. And I like to have fellowship with good, sensible people, and I know anyone who will listen to this is of that caliber. Otherwise, they wouldn't listen. And I just thank God for every opportunity. And it is in His cause that I do and say and are involved in anything in life.
Amen. Thank you very much, Ken. Thank you.